From its beginnings in 27 BCE, the Roman Empire's influence expanded over many centuries as its armies conquered regions in Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. Rome divided these areas into governable provinces. At its peak, the Roman Empire covered approximately 1.9 million square miles. It stretched from Britain in the northwest to Egypt in the southeast. Rome's leaders held jurisdiction over the lives of 55 to 65 million people, equal to approximately 20% of the world's population. However, the roots of the Roman Empire were in a Roman Republic that crumbled, and that downfall was partly due to the ambitions of Gaius Julius Caesar. He was a man who would prove so influential that the Romans would honour him by renaming the month of Quintilis as July. Caesar was born in Subura, Rome, in July of the year 100 BCE. His family was of the Julius Caesar's patrician class, a noble group that held ruling status in the Roman Republic. Caesar's mother, Aurelia, was descended from a line of military leaders, and his father, also called Gaius Julius Caesar, came from a family that drew its lineage back to the city's founding. Caesar's father held many notable roles, including serving as a Roman senator and overseeing a provincial army. And Caesar's aunt was married to the celebrated military leader, Gaius Marius. That was an important role in the expanding republic. Caesar attended lectures on philosophy and persuasive speaking as a youngster. These were necessary skills for anyone wishing to enter the public eye. At the time, the Roman Forum was the center of the city's political life. It was a rectangular plaza surrounded by government buildings, and it was the place where crowds would gather to watch people of stature debate ideas, answer questions, and lay out their visions for the future of Rome. Speakers who could hold the audience's attention were the most revered, and it said young Caesar aspired to acquire such a talent. When Caesar was still a teenager, his uncle fell into a dispute with political rival Lucius Cornelius Sulla. Marius and Sulla disagreed on many things, not least of which was how to deal with rising disquiet among those outside of Rome. Over many years, the two men engaged in multiple confrontations, fighting for control of Rome's future. In 85 BCE, the tumult between Marius and Sulla was spilling over into civil war. The same year, Caesar's father suddenly died, leaving the 16-year-old as the head of his family. The young Caesar was swiftly nominated to to the role of Flamen Dialis, the high priest of Jupiter. At the time, Romans worshipped many gods. Priests performed religious ceremonies in the belief that the deities would bring good fortune to the people of the Republic. The revered position gave Caesar several privileges, including the ability to grant a reprieve to prisoners. However, there were some rather peculiar restrictions. As a priest, Caesar was not permitted to touch a horse or to spend a single night outside the city's walls. Around this time, Caesar was also married to Cornelia, the daughter of Marius's ally. That certified his place among the Roman elites. However, Sulla would eventually seize complete control of the Republic. Marius was in charge of a military campaign in Africa at the time, and decided not to return to Rome. With his uncle gone, Caesar drew the unwelcome attention of Sulla. The young man was stripped of his priesthood and his inheritance. Sulla also ordered Caesar to divorce Cornelia, but he refused. As a final act of vengeance, Sulla had Caesar proscribed, marking him for execution. Fortunately for Caesar, his mother's family held significant influence, so the mandate was soon lifted. Still, Caesar was wary of Sulla and those loyal to him, so he opted to leave Rome. Unburdened by the limits of priesthood, Caesar signed up for military service. There was no standing military in Rome at the time, so people who joined were hired by generals or wealthy nobles with the blessing of the Senate and priests. He served in various Roman provinces under the guidance of highly respected generals. In 81 BCE, Caesar participated in the siege of Mytilene, helping the Roman Republic quash a revolt on the Greek island of Lesbos. Caesar was awarded the civic crown, one of the highest honors for those serving Rome. Caesar finally felt it was safe for him to return to Rome after the death of Sulla in 78 BCE. He became a legal practitioner, which included prosecuting former governors for corruption and extortion. No doubt informed by the philosophy and rhetoric classes of his youth, Caesar earned a reputation as a strong speaker with a commanding presence. Encouraged by his teachers, Caesar would step into the Roman Forum and fiercely debate with men much older than him, greatly entertaining the surrounding crowds. There is one anecdote that speaks to Caesar's sense of self. At the age of 25, he travelled across the Aegean Sea in the Mediterranean, only to be kidnapped by Cilician pirates. It is said that he maintained a sense of authority throughout the ordeal, and when the pirates demanded 20 talents of silver, roughly 1,400 pounds in weight, Caesar told them to ask for 50. In 76 BCE, Caesar and Cornelia welcomed a daughter. As with all females born into the Iuli family, she was named Julia Caesaris. Little is known about her childhood, but her mother Cornelia passed away when she was 7. This came shortly after Caesar was elected to the role of quaestor, similar to an official state treasurer. Shortly thereafter, Caesar travelled to the provinces of Hispania, in what is now Spain and Portugal, to serve out his term. He sent his daughter to live with her maternal grandmother. Legend has it that Caesar was in the Hispanic port of Cadiz when he came across a statue of Alexander the Great. He was the Macedonian leader who conquered much of the Mediterranean and Asia 2 centuries prior. Caesar was overcome as he looked up at the sculpture of the king, realizing he was now at an age when Alexander had fully established his empire. One can only imagine the impact this moment had on Caesar. But when he returned to Rome in 67 BCE, his political ambitions were clear. Caesar understood that if he were to secure his place in Roman society, he would first need to improve relations with those loyal to his uncle's rival, Sulla. It is said that Caesar married Pompeia, a granddaughter of Sulla, because he believed it would be politically astute. Although the marriage would not last, the move paid off for Caesar. He was soon elected to a role which granted him oversight of multiple aspects of civic life, including festivities. Caesar's duties included hosting ludi, open-air games designed to thrill and excite the Roman public. Attendees typically numbered in the tens of thousands, and it's clear Caesar understood each ludi was an opportunity to build political favour with Rome's elites. From high-intensity chariot races to exotic animal displays and gladiatorial battles, Caesar ensured his games were as elaborate as they were extraordinary. And it seems the plan worked. In 63 BCE, Caesar was elected Pontifex Maximus, chief priest of the Roman religion. But Caesar still hoped for more. The following year, he was sent to govern the province of Hispania Ulterior, but he was unable to travel because he had outstanding debts. He still understood the governorship's value, so he met with Marcus Licinius Crassus, the richest man in Rome. Caesar asked Crassus to help him financially. Crassus agreed, but in return, he wanted Caesar's support in his feud against Roman statesman and general Gnaeus Pompey Magnus. Magnus had once been a student of Sulla, and though Caesar must have known that siding with Crassus was politically risky, he saw it as a necessary step toward fulfilling his destiny. While in Hispania, Caesar led several military campaigns, overseeing multiple legions, each made up of 3,000 to 6,000 soldiers. Caesar proved to have keen instincts for war. His troops lauded him as Imperator, a celebratory title recognizing his leadership in tough battles. The definition was more than symbolic. It made Caesar eligible for recognition in a triumph, a civil ceremony in which he would be publicly celebrated in a spectacular parade through the streets of Rome. However, to participate in the event, Caesar would have to remain beyond the city's walls until the day of the triumph. At the time, Caesar was also preparing to run for consul, the highest elected position in ancient Rome. Each year, 2 consuls were seated and expected to operate side by side. Unfortunately for Caesar, the city's rules meant anyone standing for such an election had to do so within the walls of Rome. Caesar appealed to the Senate, asking for permission to operate his political campaign while outside of the city. However, Cato the Younger, a conservative senator and noted traditionalist, blocked the move. Ultimately, Caesar chose to return to Rome and pursue consulship. Caesar campaigned for consul in 60 BCE, much to the chagrin of his political rivals. The election was tainted with scandal, as many tried to derail his efforts, including lobbying against Caesar's preferred co-consul. Indeed, even Cato, a man with a history of prosecuting corrupt officials, is said to have resorted to bribery to try and end his ascendancy. But Caesar was ever the tactician. He decided to organize a reconciliation between his creditor, Crassus, and longtime rival, Pompey, hoping they would both back his run. Caesar explained to the men that they would have enough money and political sway to control Rome. Caesar's daughter, Julia, married Pompey to secure the alliance, later known as the First Triumvirate. During this period, Caesar married his third wife, Calpurnia, the daughter of an influential senator. Caesar won his election, and in 59 BCE, he was seated as co-consul. But soon after, Caesar began to ignore his colleague and issued unilateral orders. He proposed many laws, including one that would redistribute public lands and the wealth of his political rivals to the poor. The move drew popular support, but his co-consul vocally opposed it. Caesar's supporters turned on his co-consul, humiliating him and driving him away from the Roman Forum. He retreated to his home, where he remained for the rest of his term. Though he tried to issue warnings about Caesar's edicts, he could not stop him from implementing his will on the people. Cato and his allies, known as the Optimates, opposed Caesar's actions. They claimed that taking control of farmland would primarily benefit Pompey and those loyal to him. The senator also noted the Republic drew a quarter of its income from such lands, ultimately putting this wealth in Pompey's control. In response, Caesar had Cato imprisoned, though he soon relented because several other senators protested the move. Before Caesar's consulship came to an end, he ensured he would enjoy immunity from prosecution for an extended period. He was conscious that his time as a consul had been controversial, and so he wanted to know his political enemies would not be able to target him immediately. Caesar also leveraged the support of his allies and secured the right to govern over provinces in what is now northern Italy, southern France, and southeastern Europe. Over the next 8 years, Caesar worked to secure and grow the provinces, engaging in battles with various Gallic and Germanic tribes. Crassus was away fighting in the east, while Pompey and his wife Julia remained together in Rome. During this time, many politicians were fighting one another over their competing visions for the Republic. In 54 BCE, Julia died. Anxious that the tragedy would damage the triumvirate, Caesar offered his great niece as Pompey's next wife. The statesman refused, which led to further unrest among some of Rome's political class. Cato and his allies in the Senate saw it as an opportunity. Together, they focused their attention on Pompey, urging him to break with Caesar. The following year, Crassus was killed in battle. Concerned about the stability of the Republic, Rome named Pompey as its sole consul, cementing his influence at the seat of power. Pompey then married the daughter of one of Caesar's enemies, ensuring the triumvirate was over. By 50 BCE, the relationship between Pompey and Caesar was in tatters. Believing Caesar was politically weakened, Cato, Pompey, and others in the ruling class decided his governorship was over and that he must return to Rome. Senator Mark Antony and several others allied with Caesar protested the decision, but they were outnumbered and could not block the recall. Still, Caesar refused. His immunity from prosecution had lapsed, and he believed he would almost certainly face a trial. The situation escalated further when Pompey publicly accused Caesar of insubordination and treason. Recognizing his fate was all but sealed, Caesar decided to break with the law and take on the Republic himself. In January of 49 BCE, Caesar led a single legion of soldiers across the Rubicon River and into Italy, an act of defiance never before seen by the Republic. Caesar made it clear he intended to storm the city itself and target Cato, Pompey, and his other rivals. As Roman armies were under the control of whoever was paying them, they were not allowed to be brought into or assembled in the city for security reasons. So, while Pompey had more soldiers, none of them were prepared to engage in Rome. Pompey's allies did not believe he had the prowess to defend the city from Caesar and his troops, and so, afraid for their safety, much of the Senate abandoned Rome and fled south. Fearing the coming civil war, Pompey sent word to the marching army, telling them that he had no intention of fighting. But for Caesar, that was of no consequence. He was determined in his mission. Over the ensuing months, Caesar and his troops fought their way across northern Italy, heading for Rome. Antony himself also led soldiers across the surrounding region, assisting Caesar's return. By the time Caesar and his legion reached the city, Pompey had fled. With Rome under his control, Caesar plotted his next move. He was determined not to let Pompey go, but he knew he risked an attack from the west should he immediately pursue his enemy across the Mediterranean. Instead, Caesar asked Antony to preside over the city while he travelled with several troops to Hispania. There, Caesar defeated many lieutenants loyal to the old regime. He then journeyed east, searching for Pompey. Over the following months, Caesar firmed up his support throughout the area, adding more legions to his army. However, some of his subordinates struggled to control their men amid a regional shortage of grain. Some of Caesar's army rebelled against their leaders, while others defected to the opposing side. Determined to take control of the situation, Caesar threatened to destroy them all unless they showed him loyalty. They fell into line, and he was able to rally his soldiers for confrontation with Pompey and his men. During this period, Caesar was voted into the role of dictator of Rome by the Senate after being nominated by Antony. By this point, Caesar's army had soldiers assembled throughout the city, which may have influenced the votes of the senators. Caesar, in turn, oversaw Antony's nomination to the position of consul. He then named Antony as master of the horse, making him second in command to the Roman Republic. 11 days after taking up his second consulship, Caesar resigned as a dictator, returning his focus to the pursuit of Pompey. In early 48 BCE, Caesar's army met with Pompey's on opposite sides of the river Apsus, in what is now Romania. Caesar had 30,000 men, while Pompey commanded 60,000. But unlike Caesar's army, Pompey's was less experienced. His soldiers spoke various languages, making organization more difficult. For many weeks, the two armies waited on either side of the river, drawing up their strategies while also trying to ensure they had enough supplies. Then, in April, Caesar marched on a critical port city, determined to cut off Pompey's supplies. Pompey and his legions gave chase, arriving close to Caesar's position. For many more weeks, the two armies fortified the hilly lands nearby, readying for battle. By June, Caesar had secured a wide area surrounding Pompey's men, essentially pinning them with their backs to the sea. However, in July, anticipating an attack, Pompey moved thousands of soldiers to critical positions, readying them for a counter-strike. What followed was an intense battle between the two sides that ultimately saw Caesar and his men having to retreat. Caesar was fortunate to escape. Though he was humiliated, he knew the importance of rallying his troops, promising them that victory would be much greater than their loss. In August, Caesar and his legions tracked Pompey to central Greece, where they fought once more. However, Caesar and his men proved victorious this time, and Pompey was forced to flee. In September of 48 BCE, Pompey sailed to Egypt, which was also in the midst of a civil war. Young Ptolemy VIII was fighting with his sister Cleopatra over leadership of the North African nation. Pompey had been an ally of the siblings' father, but Ptolemy was suspicious of his intentions. Without warning, Pompey was ambushed and killed by Ptolemy's soldiers soon after landing on Egypt's shores. Caesar arrived in the country soon after the death of his enemy. He was presented with Pompey's remains and his seal ring, a common piece of jewelry among the Roman ruling classes, used to imprint the bearer's personal symbol in wax. Despite being his longtime rival, Caesar was heartbroken to receive these items and vowed vengeance against Pompey's assassins. Caesar offered Cleopatra support in her battle with Ptolemy and began an affair with the Egyptian queen. During this time, Caesar was also named to the role of Roman dictator once more. In early 47 BCE, Ptolemy was defeated in what would later be known as the Battle of the Nile. To celebrate the victory, Caesar and Cleopatra travelled along the great river, accompanied by a procession of 400 ships. Caesar's status as a famed leader was assured. The following April, Caesar travelled to what is now Tunisia, where he took on the Optimates and those loyal to his longtime foe, Cato. The Optimates were swiftly beaten by Caesar's experienced troops. His campaign for control of Rome continued to Hispania, where he destroyed the last of Pompey's support. With absolute power over Rome, Caesar was elected twice more to consul. Back in the city, Caesar was determined to reshape public life. He was named dictator in perpetuity and began to institute a number of reforms that upended much of Roman life. Many within the Senate grew suspicious of his actions. They were anxious that he was preparing to name himself king, which would bring an end to the Republic. Fearing tyrant rule, several senators concocted a plan to end Caesar once and for all. On March 15th of the year 44 BCE, Caesar was scheduled to appear at a senatorial session. It was to be held at the theatre of Pompeii, which was named for his old ally turned enemy. Antony learned of the plot to kill Caesar, and though he tried to get to the theatre to warn him, he was stopped by one of the conspirators. Caesar arrived at the site, where he was approached by a senator. The man presented Caesar with a petition, asking for his help in bringing his exiled brother back to Rome. Several other senators gathered around, voicing their support for his request. Caesar waved him away, only for the senator to manhandle him. A dagger was unsheathed, then another, and another. Caesar died on the steps of the Senate, on the Ides of March. He was 55 years old. The assassination of Caesar threw Rome into turmoil. Many civil wars were fought over the following years, as the Republic pulled itself apart. However, through the battles, new leaders emerged, giving rise to the Roman Empire. During a ludi to memorialize Caesar, a comet soared across the sky, delighting the audience below. Many believed it was a sign from the former leader himself. In January of the year 42 BCE, the Roman Senate recognized Caesar as a god. Much like Alexander the Great before him, Caesar's legend has continued to spread long after his death. He has been lionized in William Shakespeare's 5-act play, which bears his name, as well as many books, films, and television shows. In the 2,000 years since his passing, Caesar's trials and tribulations are still just as commanding as the man himself.